Someday, we'll need to be somewhere again. And when that day comes, Amtrak is here for you with mask requirements, space for distancing, and efficient air filtration. So when you're ready, we're ready to take you.
Not hearing it, but okay.
This is Inside the Orange, a behind-the-scene look at Syracuse University athletics.
All right. We welcome you into our inaugural Inside the Orange edition. Stephen Fonte, Paulie Sibilia with you as we welcome in Pete Moore from Syracuse University, Sports Information Director. Pete, always great to chat with you. How are you today?
I'm great, guys. How are you?
We're doing well. So this is a new idea that we came up with. Essentially, we're kind of looking, we're pulling the curtain back and taking a behind the scenes look at Syracuse athletics. This is our inaugural episode, Pete. I've known you for quite some time. It goes back to my days as a college athlete, and then I certainly worked with you in that capacity, calling games at Ithaca College. You were there for a while, and you've been here at Syracuse University since 1998. Tell us how you got into this line of work, if you could.
I'll try to make it a short story because it's a little bit unconventional. But when I was looking at colleges at that time, there really weren't undergraduate offerings for this kind of career like there are now. Now you have sports management, sports administration, any number of things you can study. And so I wasn't even aware of the profession. As it turned out, what I ended up studying helped prepare me really well. I went to a small school, and I knew I either wanted to coach at the high school level or I knew I wanted to get involved with sports media. So I ended up getting my degree in phys ed teaching with the intention of coaching, and then my minor was radio and television. And I did a lot of radio and TV stuff at the school I went to, and I was sports editor of the student newspaper. And as it turned out, like I said, that stuff all helped prepare me. And a year after I graduated, the sports information director's position where I went to school in Ohio opened, and I happened to be there. So I was fortunate enough to kind of fall into that. And then that got my career going. And I've been really fortunate. The places I've been, like you mentioned at Ithaca, Steve, I was there for 12 years at a time when their athletic program and the people involved were just amazing. So I was blessed there, and then now I've been at Syracuse for 24 years, and that's been fantastic too. So my career, I've had a couple breaks along the way that really helped me out, and I've loved doing it.
You know, Pete, you're now the director of athletic communications for men's basketball and women's soccer. What exactly is it that are your responsibilities in this job?
Well, the two sports I have that you mentioned, of course, that the responsibilities I have for those are a little bit different, but a lot of it's dictated by the external audience and primarily the media. So very basically, I'm sort of one-stop shopping for media people who are interested in either the men's basketball or the women's soccer program. If they want to interview a student athlete, interview a coach, if they need information about the program, they can come to me for that, and then I arrange those sort of things. A lot of it's preparing information, putting out information, Cuse.com, our website, the content for those two sports usually comes in some way from me. But basically, I'm sort of the place to go for media who want information on those two teams at Syracuse.
You know, we've known each other a long time, Pete, and we deal with each other all the time and trying to set up interviews or getting information, whatever. How hard is that when I would assume it's exciting. Let's take men's basketball, for instance. When that team goes on a Final Four run, I'm sure it's exciting and it's fun to be around, but it's also, I would imagine for you, very stressful, right? Because you're getting, you're probably getting tenfold the amount of interview requests and requests for information or credentials or whatever the case may be. So when the team's really good, again, I would assume it's exciting for everybody up on the staff there. But how challenging is that for you to navigate like a Final Four run?
That's a really good question. I've been lucky that the program that I'm associated with has had Final Four runs. First of all, there's nothing like it in my profession. It's just the absolute best. But it's also very challenging. The best way I can explain it is the first time that I had a Final Four experience, we won the national championship. So that was in 2003. And the best way to explain it is we started out in Boston and played 2 games there. And when we won there, then we went to the next site was in Albany. And the number of media that were credentialed, that were on site to cover those games doubled from Boston to Albany. And then from Albany, we went to New Orleans for the Final Four, and it doubled again. So the volume, the number of media requests when you're on that kind of a run, it is large to say the least. And each time you win, it increases, and you end up. It is stressful, and you end up. In order to accomplish things, you have to decide to say no to some requests, and then you've got to kind of prioritize the ones that you think are important. So it's exhilarating. It's amazing to be a part of it, but it is a lot of work, and it is a bit of a challenge to navigate that.
When you're prioritizing, what makes it valuable to the program? If you're going to say yes to somebody, I'm sure you're obligated to like CBS and TNT in the tournament, but what makes it worthwhile for the program when you're setting these interviews up?
Well, that's a really good question too. First and foremost, I think I have a responsibility to the student athletes and the coaches. I want to keep in mind that the run that they're on as participants is also exhilarating and can be a once in a lifetime experience. And I don't want to take away from that by loading them down with media inquiries. I want them, and of course we all as fans, we want them to be able to play their best. So I don't want the media obligations to be in any way detracting from the experience that they're having in going to a Final Four. So I think that's probably what I think of first. And then you certainly have an alignment with the local media that have covered you all year. They certainly deserve consideration, and we want to help them. And that's, the majority of our fans in the Syracuse community. We want them to have access to that information. And then you're trying to decide what's going to get the most exposure, what's going to be the most beneficial for the program in terms of recruiting and in publicizing the program. And so you kind of go through prioritizing it that way. It helps to, after you've been through it, then if you get to go through it again, I've found it did help to realize that it's impossible to say yes to everybody. And so you have to end up prioritizing it in some way, but you really want to make sure that the student athletes and the coaches are able to enjoy what can be a once in a lifetime experience for them, just like it is for you.
Syracuse went on that run a couple years ago with Buddy Boeheim, and this just made me think, who's the most requested player you've ever had for interviews? You've had the likes of a Carmelo Anthony, a GMAC, who's the most requested player?
Well, that's a hard question to answer, but you've kind of named certainly Melo in 2003, and he's unique in every aspect. when I think back to that year and think that he was only 18 years old, I mean, just remarkable. And I loved having Mello to work with. He was great. So he got a ton. And the further we went as the year went on, of course, the more he got. And back at that time, we did a lot of stuff over the phone. But we still do for, out of town people. But he'd see me coming before practice, holding my phone out, and he'd say, "Not going to do it. Not going to do it." And I'd dial up the number and hand him the phone, and he'd be unbelievable. And he so congenial. He was exactly the way he came across. Nothing fake about him. I always like saying that a couple of the guys that he hung around with most on that team were walk-ons. So he was the best player in college basketball that year, but he didn't act that way, around the team or around the media. And his smile was dynamic. And so he's on that list. Jerry is another one. Jerry, from the moment he got here, he came with his following from Scranton. So it started with that. But then he was such a dynamic player and such a important part of our team and we had him for 4 years. So he'd certainly be on that list. And then Buddy, no question, Buddy, his last 2 years having the tie-in, everybody wants to ask him about his dad. So that increased the number of questions that he got. And then, like you said, Paulie, when that postseason run we had that he fueled, he was certainly the one that was getting the most requests.
Pete, you mentioned a couple of times so far in the 10 minutes we've been talking about how you can't say yes to everybody, and I totally get that. I guess my question to you is that hard that you have to say no to people, and they've got a job to do, and you've got a job to do in it, and I would imagine that sometimes it is a thankless job that you do because you can't please everybody, and at the end of the day, some people are going to be upset, and I mean, was that difficult for you earlier in your career, or especially early when you got to Syracuse? Because obviously SU is such a more high-profile program than like Ithaca, for instance. Was that hard for you to kind of get over, some people are upset with me that I couldn't grant them an interview request?
Yeah, that my answer to that is kind of a yes and no. And I probably should have said up front that I'm taking my cues from Coach Boeheim and what he wants in terms of media access. Having said that, our program's been very unique in that he has wanted to have an open locker room after games. And that's really an NBA model. It's very rare at the college level until you get in the NCAA tournament, and then they mandate that you have an open locker room. But I'm talking about during the regular season, it's rare to have an open locker room. So I like that. That comes from him, but I like that for a number of reasons, and I think it accommodates the media in the best possible way that we can. By allowing them into the locker room, coach says, if you played in the game, you need to be available. I like that too. That's good, unless you're hurt. And so I think I like to feel that we're very accommodating in that setting. Other schools are apt to have a 1 day a week kind of thing with a men's basketball program. We don't do that because we have the post-game access component of it that most programs don't have. As far as the yes and no, I certainly know that every request is legit from the person who's asking. They want that kind of access. It's easier to say no when their requests, when you know that it doesn't fall into your parameters, you're just not going to be able to do it, or you can't arrange it time-wise. It's not hard to say no in those instances, but it is hard to say no when they've got a legit request and you just can't pull it off. From the starting point, you want to be accommodating. You want to try to help as best you can. I guess the other people that it might be easy to say no to are if you get a request that's not from the local area, that's a little bit obscure. And one cue for me is if I get a call and the media person says, I'm interested in interviewing Coach Boeheim. If they hit me with that, it's pretty easy.
Red flag.
No.
Yeah, right. That's a pretty quick and easy one. Yeah, Paulie, go ahead.
You know, that was the first time you've mentioned coach, and you're, in charge of setting. I'm lucky from my job that I get to see the behind the scenes stuff. And maybe you could walk through people. You are also in charge of getting the TV announcers to meet with Coach Boeheim before the game so that they can know the scouting reports. And what's it like for you is just to see, watching him break down a game for those guys is amazing. And just like, what's it like for you to watch him interact with the media?
I love it. I mean, I'm like to be a part of that. I got to make sure that I don't fall over or something, because I just eat it up. I enjoy it so much. I enjoy those interactions. That's one of the things that I really like about my job. Another thing I'd say about Coach that people probably don't realize is, of course, he's been at it for so long. And before the days of social media and all the games being on TV, he made connections along the way with media people. And there are media people who can call him directly. That's not always the case in our profession, where some coaches want everything run through people before it gets to them. But if he's developed a rapport with somebody, he has no problem with taking that kind of call. So that's a good situation, I think, for the media people that have developed that rapport with him. But yeah, the interactions with the TV people and to hear how Coach answers things, and it helps me do my job. It gives me background, but it also, as a fan, I get a real kick out of it. And there's some interactions that you just can't, I think of one that I'll share with you was with Bobby Knight. Bobby Knight was past coaching. He was doing work for ESPN, and he was an analyst, and he was doing a game at Syracuse. And he wanted to talk to Coach before the game. And so it was my job to take him back to Coach's office prior to the game. And so I'm walking Bob Knight back to meet Jim Boeheim, and Coach Knight says to me out of the blue, he says, I haven't been here, I don't think, since 1965 or so. And I said, is that right? And he said, yeah, I was the JV coach at Army, and the varsity was getting ready to play in a tournament that included Syracuse with Dave Bing, Miami with Rick Barry, Army was really good at the time, and Princeton with Bill Bradley. And can you imagine? And he said, so my job as a JV coach was to scout. So I drove up and watched Dave Bing and Jim play in Manley Fieldhouse, and I had to do the scouting report for that tournament. That kind of exchange, you can't put a value on it. That's the kind of stuff that and then we get back to where Coach is prepping before the game, and to see them interact. And I'm thinking, these two guys got how many wins between them, national championships. It was just an amazing thing to witness.
The next question I have for you about Coach Boeheim is he's had some cleanup on aisle 3 moments in the press conferences after games. Even if you go back to the Jerry not 10 effing games, what's that like for you when you're sitting there watching these press conferences and he's dropping F-bombs on Jerry McNamara being underrated?
I wonder how I should answer that. First of all, if you don't know by now, Coach thinks about what he's going to say, and he's also really smart, and he doesn't need, it's not like, if I was working with a coach who had less experience and I might give him a couple of tips, or, that's not the case. We don't need that here. So he's prepared. in every circumstance. In fact, the people that I know, a lot of people like watching his post-game press conferences, but he's really good at his opening statement, and it's because he thinks about it, and he puts a lot out there in his opening statement. He covers a lot of ground, and that's a really effective method, I think, that he has. Anyway, so I'm back I'm like the Wizard of Oz. I'm sort of the man behind the curtain when that's going on. The thing with Jerry, of course, I'll never forget. My reaction to it at the time was he's defending his guy. That's the first thing I thought of was, you know what? He's defending Jerry. He's standing up for his guy, and I'm all for that. So I became a little bit of a spectator in that scene, but I guess I've given a long answer. The short answer is he knows what he's going to say. He knows how to deliver it. I trust him implicitly. I have no reason not to know that he has a reason for saying whatever it is going to be. And I know it's thought out. I know it's not off the cuff. So, but I become a little bit of a spectator when those kind of things happen. It's not a type of situation where when he's done, I say, you probably shouldn't have said that.
What were you thinking?
That's not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's probably smart, Pete. We've talked about your responsibilities, and you do a lot there. But one of the things you do, and we've touched on it, is set up interviews for the student athletes. I'm curious with the NIL, the way that it is, and the fact that it's so new and it's not going away. Does your job change at all? Has your job changed at all with the NIL in terms of trying to set up student athletes with certain interviews or try to put them out there more so that maybe they can benefit off their name, image, and likeness in some way?
Well, I think it's uncharted waters. I mean, we've gotten into it, but prior to it, nobody had any idea. And then once it started, even now, I don't think anybody has a really good feel for it in any sport, whether it's the student athlete, the coach, so it's very new. It makes things a little more challenging for me in trying to arrange stuff. I, at this point, have not gotten involved in arranging any of the media appearances that are related to NLI. That hasn't been part of my thing. And I also haven't, I wondered about, is there going to be a problem, or is there going to be criticism that a student athlete might be available in an NLI appearance, but they're not being available for the media otherwise? And that hasn't really happened, but it's still such an unknown. But I'd say it's a challenge, and it's something new.
Pete, when Paulie was taking you down memory lane with the press conference, the GMAC, not when, they wouldn't have won 10 games without him. When you look back on your career, you've been a part of some great moments, great games, great wins. What comes to mind for you? Like if you had to do a top 3 moments in your professional life, could you do that? What would come to top of mind for you?
It'd be really difficult to come up with just 3. I've been so lucky and so fortunate. The national championship in 2003, there's nothing like that. That has to be on the list. There's just nothing like it. And then the way it went for us, we weren't ranked in the preseason. The whole Carmelo, 18 years old. Carmelo had this amazing ability to, in the big games, he was even better. And when we got in the postseason in the NCAA, it was like each game he had a bigger impact. Just remarkable, the numbers that he was putting up. And then Jerry being on that team, the championship game, the 6 threes. The captain on that team, the one senior, was Queth Duaney, and Queth's probably been one of my favorites in the time I've been here because he was such a good guy and he worked so hard. So that's definitely on there. The 6 overtime game is another thing you just can't imagine that you'd ever be a part of something like that. And even when it's going on, you're shaking your head. I mean, it's another overtime, and then it's getting to the point where fans are wondering, are they going to be able to get to the train? You know, they've got to go to work in the morning, and the train. There's just so much about that game that was just over the top and difficult to even imagine what that was like. The run we had in the Big East tournament when Jerry went off and on his buzzer beaters, and that was really remarkable too. I'd probably have to include that. My first football game is a interesting story because it was my first official day at work was a Friday. I come into work. I just come from Ithaca College, Division III school. I come into work Friday, get on a chartered plane. I get to my seat, my name's on it, and there's 2 sub sandwiches there. I think I'm in heaven, you know. Chartered plane. Where are we going? We're going to Michigan. We're going to play in the Big House. Michigan had just increased their attendance capability, their capacity at the Big House, so that we already knew the game was going to be played in front of the biggest crowd in college football history up to that point. So we fly to Michigan. We get there. We go to the stadium for walkthrough. The announcers are Brent Musburger and Dan Fouts. Now, at that time, Brent Musburger was the guy, right? He was one of the play-by-play guys. Dan Fouts, of course, I'd watched play pro football with San Diego. He was awesome. So that's our meeting at the stadium, is with those guys. In the early evening, the administrators, which I was included, we went to a reception that Michigan held that was hosted by Bo Schembechler, who was the former coach. Then we go out to dinner. I mean, it's just amazing. Saturday.
It's a pretty good first day, Pete.
Day 2, we're driving into the stadium, and so the crowd's going to be over 100,000. And I'm noticing that at Michigan, they're parking spectator cars on the golf course. And I'm thinking, okay, we know where golf ranks here because they're parking cars on the golf course to go to the football game. We get to the football game, largest crowd in history, Donovan McNabb's senior year, and we roll Michigan. That was pretty good. That I got to rank up there too.
Pete, I got one question for you. I'm going to take Jerry, Carmelo, and Buddy out of the mix because you already brought those 3 up. If I came to you right now and said, hey, I want to talk Syracuse basketball with a former player, who would you say, this is the guy you need to talk to? He's going to be your best interview.
Wow. Best interview as in...
As in, like, who's the best interview for us? It's going to be, for a player that was here during your time.
Huh. Wow. There's a lot of guys.
I'm trying to think of who I would request, Paul.
I'll tell you, it's funny because Pete, you were there the year before the national championship. I went to Quethawany every interview for that year because he was just amazing, you know. So I don't mean to put you on the spot. I was just hoping that
Johnny Flynn was a great interview. I remember
Johnny Flynn was amazing as well. You know, it's interesting. Some guys are really good at it. Some guys, and certainly during the course of a year, the upperclassmen do a little bit more, and I might. There's occasions where I can recommend who to talk to, and Paul, you're absolutely right. I would, if someone said, "Well, who should we talk to?" I'd say Queth, no question about it. He was so good, and Steve, you're right too. Johnny Flynn was amazing. But there's been a lot of guys. You know, Alan Griffin was really good when he was a player, and he was great to work. Alan Griffin was great to work with. Ryan Blackwell was My first year, he was on that team. He was great. Eric Devendorf was great. Eric was is another one of my favorites because he did everything I asked him to do. He was knowledgeable, and he was really good. We've had guys like, I've been lucky because we've always had guys like that were really good that you could go to and that you knew that would represent really well.
Another one that comes to mind as we're talking here, Scoop was always a guy that he would be honest with you. If he played awful, he would tell you he played awful. If he played great, he told you, you could go to him and he would honestly assess the game, the team. He would always say yes too. He was fantastic, win or lose. I always respected that about him.
Scoop wasn't shy. He still is.
Yeah, he enjoyed it. He enjoyed it. I guess last one for you, Pete, as we wrap this up. Going back to that young man that attended college in Ohio and then made his way to Ithaca College, did you ever envision that, you'd be rubbing elbows with NBA players and NFL players and going to Final Fours and national championship games? I mean, I guess as you look back on your career here, and I know it's not over yet, but as you stop and pause, I mean, can you appreciate all that you've accomplished and been a part of?
Well, I've said it a number of times. I just feel so lucky and blessed that I was able to do that. I could not have imagined it at that time. I started getting a little bit of it when I was at Ithaca because of the quality of the people that I was working with. The football coach when I got there was Jim Butterfield, and he was a remarkable human being besides being a coach. That was great. We won, Ithaca won 2 national championships in football while I was there. And so there was some media exposure. When we got to the Stag Bowl, the championship game, you're on ESPN, which was a huge thing for a Division III program. So working with him was just, it doesn't get any better to use an overused phrase, but that was a remarkable experience. And there were other coaches there too. George Valicene was the baseball coach. They won a baseball national championship while I was there. So I got some of that when I was there, but then to come to the Cuse and have those interactions, it's just been amazing. I've also been lucky enough to work some PGA events, and I've loved doing that. There's a Syracuse alum who works for the PGA named John Deaver, who's been very generous in having me as part of his team. When they play at Oak Hill, I've worked both the senior PGA and the regular tour PGA up there. And to walk, I'm walking through the locker room and there's Tom Watson and he says hi to me. That, if you're a golf fan, that's just, amazing. And then a couple years back, I got to work the Ryder Cup for the PGA, and that was over the top. That was because you had the crowds, right? You had the stadium seating and Tiger, and I mean, that was amazing. So I've been able to view a lot of those type events. I've worked the Final Four when Syracuse wasn't in it. I worked as part of the media relations team, and that was remarkable too. I've seen so many just amazing, great things up close. And I joke about, I got a pretty good seat, where I sit, although I've been moved a couple times, but near Paulie. Paulie and I have
he's got the honor of sitting next to me.
we have pretty good seats, and I just enjoy the heck out of being able to hear what's going on in the huddle and being that close. It's been a real trip.
Well, this has been fun, Pete. We appreciate you coming on and being a part of our inaugural Inside the Orange show. Continued success. I would say enjoy the summer. I feel like you never have downtime though. So I mean, it certainly is a 365-day-a-year job. But enjoy the summer to the extent you can enjoy it, and I'm sure we'll be bugging you for interview requests before you know it.
Well, when I'm dealing with you guys, it's not bugging me, and I enjoy. I should have made a bigger point of saying that I do enjoy most of the media interaction as it is. So that's part of the fun part of the job as well, is the chance to rub elbows with you guys and chat things up. So I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully we did enough good job here that they'll want to do a second one with somebody else.
We already have our second one booked. Next Thursday, same time, Sue Edson will be joining us.
All right, there you go. We've got Sue Edson next week.
Boss coming in after me. All right.
Yeah.
That's right. So thank you, Pete. Thank you for everybody who watched and listened to us on QSportsTalk.com. We'll have Sue Edson on next week on Inside the Orange.